Hello, hi, it's me Mars. If you don't know me, I am a Lifeweaver one-trick content creator. I have been one-tricking him since the release, highest rank I've achieved is Masters 3, and I've recently hit over 1,000 hours as Lifeweaver. Now, the reason I'm saying all of this is just to give you a bit of context before going into this video, which is centered around my personal thoughts and opinions rather than talking about things objectively. So yep, some of the stuff I say in this video, probably going to be a bit biased, okay? Just please keep that in mind. Again, just to make sure we're on the same page, this video isn't really about what should or shouldn't happen to Lifeweaver, but it's more about what I personally want to happen to Lifeweaver as a one-trick. So there you go, there's your warning. Take everything I say with a grain of salt. This video is going to be broken down into a few different sections, and it's going to start off with me giving you a brief overview/review of all the balancing changes that Lifeweaver received over 2025. And then I'm going to go on to what I personally want to see happen to Lifeweaver in 2026, including his weapons, abilities, perks, the whole thing. All of which is going to be timestamped in case there is a specific thing that you're looking for. With all that said and done, please enjoy the video. Lifeweaver's balance had an interesting start to the year with the introduction of perks to the game, the two most prominent perks being the Life Cycle and Super Bloom. Super Bloom started off a bit weaker than it is right now, but only a month after its debut it got some really nice buffs. Those buffs being increasing the damage of the explosion, reducing the number of thorns required to trigger, and increasing the window of time to trigger Super Bloom. With all of these buffs, plus Life Cycle, which gave you permanent 10 healing per second, came the birth of the beloved Tank Weaver, which allowed you to off-angle and do crazy amounts of damage while basically never dying. The balance team did it, they finally made Lifeweaver somewhat viable, and things continued to get better. Towards the end of April, Thornvolley's projectile speed was increased from 80 to 100 meters per second, followed by Healing Blossom's auto-charge rate being increased by 25% towards the end of May. I personally thought these changes were excellent and really improved on the clunkiness of Weaver's kit and allowed him to weave more effectively. Then in June we finally got a nice little buff to Cleansing Grasp, which had basically been completely irrelevant since perks were released. This buff made it so that when Life Grip cleanses a debuff, its cooldown is reduced by 4 seconds. This wasn't anything crazy, especially compared to Life Cycle, which was still insanely OP, but hey, a buff is a buff. But then the day of reckoning came upon us, the 26th of August, where Lifeweaver's base health was reduced from 225 to 200, and Life Cycle was completely removed from the game. His previous major perk, Life Weaving, was nerfed and now replaced Life Cycle, as well as getting a new major perk called Petal Power, where allies stood on Petal Platform gained a 25% attack speed bonus. Originally, I had the hot take of agreeing with these buffs and thinking that they were a good idea. While yes, Life Cycle made Lifeweaver good and viable in solo queue ranked, I just didn't think it was very healthy for the game. With Life Cycle, I had countless games where I would have 2 deaths, 1 death, and sometimes even 0 deaths, and while it was fun, it just kind of felt like I was cheesing games, so I was kind of happy to see the removal of the perk. I was also very glad to see that Petal Power was a perk they decided to introduce, since this was a very similar idea to something that I had suggested in one of my previous videos. However, in reality, he just felt so bad to play. They completely gutted his survivability, and it just felt like you really could not do anything as Lifeweaver. While in theory, Petal Power sounded like a cool perk, in practice it just felt too clunky and too situational since it forces you to be stood on your platform. While yes, in some maps there are cool spots where you can purposefully get the platform stuck under a ceiling, you are still tied to the platform. You cannot move or rotate and keep the attack speed because the effect doesn't linger. As soon as you step off the platform, the attack speed buff is instantly gone. We then had to deal with this painful state of Lifeweaver all the way from the 26th of August to the 14th of October, where finally, Life Weaving's extra healing was buffed from 20 to 30, and the attack speed of Petal Power was increased from 25 to 30%. So not the most interesting buffs, but hey, at least they were something, right? No. Realistically, these buffs did nothing for Lifeweaver, and the best perks continued to be Cleansing Grasp and Super Bloom because they were by far the most effective. We then move on to the final balance changes for Lifeweaver of 2025, where on the 11th of November, Weaver's model and hitbox was reduced by 8%, the automatic reload time of Weaver's weapons was reduced from 2.5 seconds to 2 seconds, and the time to swap weapons was halved. Now I'm sure to most players this probably doesn't seem like a whole lot, but to me and a lot of other Lifeweaver players this was kinda huge. These were significant quality of life changes that Weaver had been needing since his release, that again improved on the fluidity of his kit. But unfortunately, quality of life changes aren't enough to make a character viable, so we are currently still stuck in a state where Lifeweaver is one of, if not the worst supports in Overwatch 2. In conclusion, 2025 feels like the balancing team took 1 step forward and 2 steps back with Lifeweaver. In the first half of the year, he gradually became more and more viable with his ability to off-angle and deal damage, but then completely gutting his survivability and balancing him to be more of a ranged poke support, because we definitely needed more of those in the game. Which leads me onto the main point of this video, that being what would I like to see for Lifeweaver in 2026? What direction would I like to see the balancing team take as a diehard one-trick? The number one thing that I want to see for Lifeweaver in 2026 has to be a minor rework to his weapons and the way that they function. While I do very much appreciate all the effort that the balance and hero design teams have put into making his weapons feel more fluid to use, to me it still feels like Lifeweaver's controls just lack the polish other newer heroes get in Overwatch. One of the main gripes I have is switching between healing and damage and the opportunity cost of choosing one over the other. Because of the way Weaver's weapons currently function, when you're in a fight it very much feels like you have to be committed to either doing damage or doing healing at any given instance. You can't really weave in healing as you're doing damage or vice versa like you can with Kiriko or Baptiste. Those two characters have a very set rhythm that you get into. Shoot twice and heal once. And even when you're not in that rhythm, you can still shoot and heal basically whenever you want and it feels fluid. Other supports such as Ana, Illari, Juno, Moira, and Wu Yang can also instantly change what they're doing on a dime with little to no compromise and it feels fluid. This is what happens when you try to do a similar thing, but as Lifeweaver. It is significantly slower and clunkier to weave healing and damage as Lifeweaver than any other support, which is so insanely ironic to me because the word weave is literally in his name. The first idea that I have to combat this is for Weaver to have one control scheme instead of two. As many people know, when Weaver was released, the Legacy control scheme was the only option available, which meant that you had to manually swap between healing and damage like Mercy, but you could use your dash whenever you wanted. After player feedback, they added the option for the new control scheme, where healing and damage is on left and right click, and dash now works as a double jump similar to Hanzo's lunge. For the majority of Overwatch players, I would say that the new control scheme is better because it by far feels the most fluid. However, if you were to ask me and plenty of other Lifeweaver mains, they would say using the Legacy control scheme with the manual swap is better. Because with the Legacy control scheme, you can b-hop your dash, which gives you significantly more distance, which is essential for survivability. You can also dash on the spot by pressing your dash key as you let go of S, which is extremely helpful, especially when you need to heal yourself on your platform. To make things simpler for everyone, I think we should only have the new control scheme, with an option to make dash function normally or like a double jump for those who want it. This way, the act of swapping between healing and damage will feel less clunky since no input is needed, and all the players who like their dash tech get to keep it. The next thing I want to talk about is Lifeweaver's Healing Blossom. You can either manually charge it, or it can passively charge itself while you do damage. Since the main thing I'm going for is better weaving, I think the passive charge rate absolutely needs to be increased again. I don't have an exact amount in mind, but I think it very much deserves to be increased again, since swapping to damage is just devastatingly punishing sometimes. I can switch to doing damage for a little while, but by the time I switch back, my healing is only at about 20-30 charge, which realistically isn't going to help a lot, especially if you're trying to heal a tank. Once again, let's compare this to Baptiste. I think these clips kind of speak for themselves. The difference here is night and day. But the passive charge rate isn't the only thing I have an issue with. I think manually charging or healing needs to be changed as well. Right now, Weaver's Healing Blossom manually charges at a fixed linear rate. However, I personally think it would be far more beneficial if the charge rate had a slight curve to it. It's a little difficult for me to explain, but the way that this would work is the healing charge would start off by rapidly increasing and then slowly tapering off, while still taking the same amount of time to charge as it currently does. Once again, I think this would make swapping to damage way less punishing, since when you swap back, you can instantly get a quick burst of charge instead of having to wait and charge it for longer. As a slight compensation, maybe Healing Blossom would need to start from 0 again, instead of currently starting from 10. And also maybe reducing the maximum amount of healing, which is currently 80, to prevent people from just spam heal botting. I would essentially like to see Lifeweaver be able to send more Healing Blossoms to more people quicker. Not to incentivize heal botting, but to incentivize, weaving your healing and your damage. Fortunately, for Lifeweaver's damage, my thoughts are a lot simpler. Lifeweaver's damage in theory is really good. 6 damage per Thorn isn't really that bad, and the main issue is that shooting anyone with armor can be quite the struggle. His damage has a 2x crit multiplier and has no fall off, which allows him to apply pressure and draw aggro from long range targets. The reason I say this is good in theory is because of the opportunity cost of doing damage. As soon as a couple people start taking some damage and maybe get to about half or low health, that's it. You need to be healing no matter what. Weaving in some damage between healing is just too risky. Once again, this is the guy that we are talking about. However, in my opinion, I think that if all the Healing Blossom changes that I previously mentioned were added, then none of this stuff with his damage would be an issue. Lifeweaver would have those opportunities to weave in damage. The only real buff that I would like to see to Weaver's damage is maybe an increase to the Thorn's projectile speed. As I mentioned in my 2025 balance review section, it very much seems like the devs are balancing him to be more of a long-ranged poke kind of support. Now whether you think that's a good idea or a bad idea is a different argument, and I'll be getting onto that later in the video. But if this is the direction that the devs truly want to take Lifeweaver in, then I think for sure increasing the projectile speed would be a nice little buff just to make his damage more consistent and valuable. Because I don't know if it's a skill issue or what, but I swear sometimes these Thorns are impossible to aim, especially from longer ranges. The next and final thing I want to talk about with Weaver's weapons is reloading. If you didn't know already, reloading your healing is an absolute no-no as Lifeweaver. This is because it resets your healing charge, then once you're done reloading, you have to charge up another Blossom. Now on paper, this might make sense, but yet again, let's compare this to other characters who have to reload their healing. Again, it is painfully slow and clunky, and it really doesn't need to be this way. The easiest fixes I can think of are either reloading does not reset the charge, or once you've reloaded, your next Healing Blossom is fully charged. I really don't think I'm asking for a lot here. Until this gets changed, what I suggest you do is if you start to reload your Healing Blossom, or you notice the animation starting, immediately switch to damage, even if there's no one to shoot. Once the charge indicator has reached about 35-ish, then you can swap back to healing because they would have automatically reloaded. This way you're not stood around doing literally nothing in the middle of a fight. Okay, real quick, I know I said that was going to be the final thing that I talk about with Weaver's weapons, however I quickly want to mention this bug that is really annoying to me. I don't know if this is a bug or what, but this is what I mean when I say Weaver's weapons lack the polish that newer heroes get in Overwatch. So, whenever you either spawn in, respawn, or reload, the first time that you swap from healing to damage by holding the shoot button, there will be basically no delay. Moz, what are you on about? I'll show you what I mean. So, I've reloaded, I've spawned in, I'm holding left click right now. I'm holding left click. Now, for me, swapping weapons is bound to scroll wheel down. So that means I can stay holding left click, and when I swap weapons, I'll just be shooting straight away. So I'm going to swap weapons, instantly shooting. Boom. Makes sense. You might be thinking, Moz, what are you on about? Alright, just stick with me. Trust me, this makes sense. For some reason, every time you swap weapons after that, without reloading, there is a slight delay. So I'm going to show you again. The first time that I swap weapons here, from healing to damage, there's going to be no delay. And then when I switch from healing to damage again, there will be a ever so slight delay. So here I'm holding this, swap weapons, there's no delay. Swap back to healing. Now if I swap back to damage, there is a slight delay before Weaver starts shooting again. I'll slow it down for you guys so you guys can see it a bit better. But why? Why does this happen? This weird delay is much more noticeable if you're using the newer control scheme that I was talking about earlier. So if you go to Escape, Options, make sure Lifeweaver is selected, use Legacy Control Scheme, make sure this is turned off. So now your healing and your damage should be on left and right click. So I'm holding left click, this makes sense, immediately hold right click, instantly swap, no delay. Whereas this time, there's a slight delay. And then after that, once you actually try and start weaving, you notice that delay before you start shooting. Holding left click, I'm holding right click. Why is there so much of a delay before he starts shooting again? Blizzard, please. This hero needs polish so bad. Alright, one thing I want to make very clear is that I don't think Lifeweaver needs any kind of rework or new base kit abilities, anything like that. I know for a while now there's been rumours of a potential Lifeweaver rework, and if that happens, then so be it, but I personally really don't think he needs one. But his current abilities absolutely need some changes. And again, please keep in mind, I'm not claiming to be some god at hero shooter balance and hero design. I'm simply talking from the perspective of someone who has an unhealthy amount of time and knowledge on Lifeweaver. So, because of the way Lifeweaver's abilities currently are, you mostly, not all the time, use them very reactively rather than proactively. But what does that mean? So he's not like an Ana who can anti someone or a Zen who can discord someone to help secure a kill. And he's not really like a Lucio or a Juno who can speed boost their teams for aggressive or defensive plays. For sure, platform is helpful for your team sometimes if you're on a map that has lots of high ground and your team doesn't have mobility. But if none of those things are an issue, then platform is either used selfishly or to block/deny abilities and ultimates. Like I said, it's very reactive, and it's a similar story with life grip. You often just wait until your tank or DPS are in too far and/or low health, and then you pull them to safety. If your team already has mobility, then chances are they might not even need the pull, since that DPS player is only thinking about their cooldowns. They're not accounting for a life grip within their ability cycle. Like, for sure, it would be nice to coordinate with your team to reposition someone mid-fight and help them off-angle or something like that, but this is Overwatch we're talking about. People treat coordination like the bubonic plague. Like, be honest, when was the last time you had a game where everyone on your team actually coordinated properly? It just doesn't really happen. To quickly sum up his abilities, they're basically a bit too reactive and a bit too tricky to coordinate. How do we fix this? To start off, I think Lifeweaver should be able to use his abilities while shooting and reloading to further lean into this weaving playstyle that I'm going for. I know this doesn't directly correlate to his abilities, but just stick with me on this one. Right now, using platform or grip will briefly interrupt your damage, but not your healing for some reason. And if you use those abilities while reloading, then your reload gets restarted. Now, I already showed you how terrible having to reload your healing is. Now imagine it getting restarted once or even twice while using your abilities. And like I said, his kit is very reactive, so there is a solid chance that this could actually happen to you in a game. Granted, it's not very common, but the fact that it can happen in the first place is just absurd. Now, not only would it make more sense from a gameplay perspective, but also visually. It makes sense for other characters to have their reloads interrupted by abilities, since they're often holding a weapon with one or both their hands, and the ability makes them use or do something without their weapon. But Lifeweaver only needs his right hand to reload, while his abilities only use his left hand. I know this isn't exactly a major change that's going to fix Lifeweaver, but again, it's just giving him that level of polish that he deserves. Plus, it'd be a new unique thing that only he can do. I don't know. To me, it seems cool. Okay, moving on to the actual abilities themselves. For Dash, I don't really have anything to say about it. If Weaver was to receive the control scheme changes that I mentioned earlier, then it would be entirely up to the player if they want to be able to access those extra dash techs. Dashing and B-hopping gives you plenty of distance. The self-heal is fine, you know, it's nothing too crazy, but it's not terrible either. There's nothing I want changed for Dash. Good job, balancing team. And now we move on to Life Grip, which, yes, I know is a very controversial ability. And I'm sure you've heard plenty of people in the Weaver community say this, but I think that when you pull someone above 75% of their HP, the cooldown should be halved. Now, once again, I am not great at talking about things from an objective, perfectly balanced point of view, because I'm a high diamond low masters noob. However, to me, this change for Weaver just seems so right. You would actively be rewarded for coordinating plays with your team, which hopefully would incentivize teams to actually, coordinate more. Not only this, but it further leans into the repositioning and weaving aspect of his gameplay identity. It would mean that instead of everything relying on that one pull on your tank going well because it's on such a long cooldown, maybe you could pull your tank to a different angle before the danger even gets there. This is what I wanted to talk about earlier when I mentioned the devs making Lifeweaver more of a long-range poke support. What if, instead of sitting in the backline waiting to pull your tank out of the fight as soon as they get to low HP, you were actually closer to everyone, repositioning your team mid-fight? I don't know about you, but to me, that sounds way more fun and interesting. I really think the devs should at least consider taking this direction for Lifeweaver, and if they do, then I think he would absolutely need to go back to 275 HP, because Weaver is the anchor of the pull, and if this hypothetical version of him is going to be closer to enemies, repositioning people more aggressively, then he's going to need the HP to survive. I think this would really help Grip be used more proactively and as more of an engaging tool, and would also reward game sense and map knowledge, while still giving Lifeweaver the opportunity to use Life Grip as a life-saving, fight-stalling cooldown. Now, let's just say that hypothetically they were to add this to the game, and life gripping people all around the place is just way stronger than we thought. I would honestly be down for life grip to not fully protect allies as they're being pulled, and instead maybe giving them like a damage reduction or something like that. That idea might be a bit cooked though, I don't know, it's just purely hypothetical. My next thing for Grip is, for the love of all that is good, can we please get Cleansing Grasp base kit? Lifeweaver players, myself included, have been asking for Grip to cleanse before perks were even a thing. I have heard so many people say that, yeah, it looks like Grip should cleanse, it would match the visual effect of it. So how is it still not base kit? Juno had a freaking major perk that gave her headshots, and they made that base kit for her. But oh no, Lifeweaver's Grip cleansing is just simply too OP and we can't do it. I don't know, if Cleansing Grasp isn't base kit in Season 21, then that's it. Dude, I'm hanging up the keyboard and the mouse, I'm going back to being a console Doomfist main. I can't do this for much longer. Also, real quick, I have another little side tangent for you. Don't worry, this one's quick, I mean it.
We do not care.
If you take a look at the description for Life Grip, you'll notice that it says it pulls an ally to your location, protecting them as they travel. Well, this is actually kind of a lie, because while yes, it does block any sort of damage to the target, they can still get hit by any kind of debuff mid-pull, like Nade, Burn, EMP, Queen Ult, etc. Now you might be thinking to yourself, oh that's fine, if the enemy team has a debuff, I'll just pick the Cleansing Grasp perk, that'll fix it, right? Nope. Not even the perk that is designed to cleanse debuffs will save you from getting hit by a debuff. Make that make sense. Dude, I can't even talk about this goddamn ability anymore. We gotta move on to platform. Speaking of platform, I'm actually not entirely sure if I want it to get changed. I know at the start of this section, I rambled about how the reactivity of Weaver's kit kinda sucks, but when it comes to platform, the reactive things that you can do with it are so cool and interesting, and it's one of the main reasons why I like playing him so much. You can do stuff like unburrowing a Venture, save yourself from Hazard's Downpour, and even completely deny Pulse Bomb if Tracer doesn't stick it. There's tons more tech that you can do with Weaver's platform and his other abilities, so I'll give you this code for this workshop mode on screen if you want to practice them for yourself. There's also this really cool tech where you can get extra height on your platform, and I'll show you how to do that now. This tech is honestly relatively simple. What you want to do is make sure that you're facing a perfectly straight wall, such as this one on Havana defense. You want to line up your crosshair right where the wall and the floor meet and throw your platform. Then when you walk onto your platform, you want to line up onto where these little metal thingies are on the platform. Like so. And then line your crosshair up so it's above this little triangle here. Now if you've lined yourself up correctly, the platform should go back down a little bit and reset. You can tell it's reset by this icon appearing here. Once this icon has appeared, it means you can repeat that whole process again. So you activate the platform, go to the metal spot, line up your crosshair, the platform should descend and reset, and now your platform is stuck up here permanently unless someone shoots it down. Just make sure that you don't step into the middle of the platform and activate it again. You can get extra height, but now, as you've seen, your platform does break. If you're looking for more spots where you can apply this tech, there's a couple videos by LifeLeaver you can go watch. I'll have them linked below. Now, not only can you do all of this really cool stuff with platform, but it's obviously also great for accessing high ground as well. The only change that I can honestly think of is reducing the time it takes for platform to come back down to the ground. In case you somehow didn't know this, once someone has stepped off of a platform after it's been raised, it will take 2 seconds for the platform to then descend so it can be used again. I think it'd be nice if maybe it took 1 second instead of 2, just because of how fast-paced Overwatch is, it's a little hard to coordinate with your team. I do think platform has even more potential, however I'm going to save that for the perk section. And last but not least we have Tree of Life, which similarly to platform I think is also in a pretty okay spot. The number of healing on the initial burst is really good, and all the bursts after that are fine. The tree lasts for 15 seconds, which is a very long time, especially compared to some other ults. You can also quite often use it to block off doorways to easily secure a kill. My main issues with Tree are the fact that the conversion of healing to overhealth when a player is at full HP isn't really anything to write home about. And also, again, because Overwatch is so fast-paced and a lot of characters have a lot of mobility, I often find myself cancelling Tree before it's even supposed to end because of its smaller radius. But to be honest, these issues aren't really that big of a deal to me. I would much prefer if the devs put their effort into fixing other parts of his kit. But if I really had to suggest a buff for his tree, then I would say for sure increasing the radius and increasing the percentage of healing that gets converted into overhealth. Maybe make it so that you don't need to be within the tree's LOS to receive the healing, but honestly that kind of sounds like Marvel Rivals slop AoE healing ultimate, and I don't know if we need more of that in Overwatch. Finally, we move on to Lifeweaver's perks, and you guessed it, they kinda suck as well. I want to quickly mention that this section's probably going to be quite a bit shorter than all the previous sections. And that's because perk balancing is a whole nother can of worms, and I really don't think I've got the brain capacity for that. Not only that, but I personally don't have a whole lot of ideas for new perks. I'm honestly up for whatever, just as long as they're actually interesting and good. First, I'll talk about Cleansing Grasp, which, like I said before, is kind of okay, but I really wish it was just base kit instead. This perk doesn't really give Weaver any new things to do, it's just, oh, if I grip someone and they happen to have a debuff on them, then I cleanse it and I get 4 seconds off my cooldown. Now, don't get me wrong, that is absolutely useful, especially if you're going against a Junker Queen, an Ashe, Sombra, Zen, or an Ana, but the fact that this perk's value mainly relies on what characters the enemy team picks just kinda seems like bad design to me. Yes, I know you can cleanse the DPS passive as well, but that doesn't give you the cooldown reduction, so it just kinda ends up being a really boring perk. Like I said before, please just make this base kit. Next is Lifeweaving, and I actually quite like the concept of this perk. I think the idea of using your dash to gain some sort of extra buff is a really interesting idea, however, extra healing is just not it. Weaver has had this perk for nearly a year, and it's almost always been bad. The extra healing that you get is just not worth it, even though you're getting it every 5 seconds. It just doesn't really amount to anything. What I would personally suggest instead is maybe dashing gives Lifeweaver and the next person he heals a slight speed boost, kinda like that perk that Brig used to have. Again, the goal here is to lean even further into the weaving and repositioning playstyle. I don't think I really need to explain how speed boost is going to help you with that, I think you can use your imagination. We now move on to Weaver's major perks, the first being Petal Power, which I already touched on in my 2025 balance review section. To summarize what I said, it's basically a bit too clunky to use because it forces you to be stood in one spot instead of being able to move around. Again, like I said with the previous perk, I really like this idea, but it needs to be changed. Instead of being forced to stand on the platform, I think you should be able to toggle the platform between 2 different modes by using the interact key. The first mode would unlock your platform and have it function as it normally does, like an elevator. And the second mode would lock your platform to the ground, unable to lift up. But whenever you walk across the platform, it gives you an attack speed and a move speed bonus that lingers for a while. This way, you could lock your platform on the ground, speed your team in without lifting them up, and then unlock it so that you can assist from above. I think this perk would be so useful because it would mean that Weaver's value with platform isn't strictly limited to either using it reactively or giving people high ground. It gives platform even more potential while still having counterplay since it can be shot and destroyed. Also, the buffs wouldn't necessarily have to be move speed and attack speed, they could be something else, but these were just the first things that came to my mind. And finally is Super Bloom. Now, I don't really want to say anything negative about this perk because I feel like if I did, then the entirety of the Lifeweaver Mafia is going to ask for my head. So there you have it, I think Weaver absolutely needs 2 new minor perks and at least 1 new major perk. And again, like I said, I'm honestly up for anything with perks, the sky is the limit. I just seriously hope that Season 21 gives Lifeweaver a big shakeup. God knows he needs it. And there you go, that just about sums up every change I want to see for Lifeweaver in 2026. If you somehow made it to this point in the video without skipping, then seriously thank you so much. This is by far the most ambitious video I've ever made, and I'm pretty proud of it. Unfortunately though, by the time you're seeing this, I'm probably going to be back at uni full time, which means I'm not going to have any spare time to make more videos like this one. Instead, I use my spare time to stream over on my Twitch, which I've been growing for the last couple years. So if you like what I do, please go over there and drop a follow, since that is where I'm going to be the most active for the foreseeable future. And if you really like what I do, then I've also got a Discord server as well. It's open to everyone, but my Twitch subscribers get access to things like variety game polls, artwork, and behind the scenes stuff before everyone else. By no means is it mandatory, they're just some nice little bonuses for giving me that extra support. Thank you very much for watching, drop a comment sharing what you thought, and that's about it. Take care.